don't care how much drains you have, it just can't. It doesn't have the capacity to carry the volume of water.
Norman Scott, Mayor of Spanish Town, and before him, Derek Sangster, Mayor of Black River. Although Mayor Scott agrees that adequate drainage systems could not cope with the volume of rainwater the island received at the weekend, he says the schemes most affected by the recent inclement weather conditions lacked that type of infrastructure. Mayor Scott says those communities were constructed in the 1960s and early 1970s.
Buildings or the schemes that are now are being built to specifications that allows for proper drainage. Most of the problem that we are having now are the schemes that were built from in the 60s and the early 70s.
Norman Scott, Mayor of Spanish Town. Meanwhile, Mayor of Maypen, Winston Mirage, sought to explain how areas of Clarendon were affected by the heavy rainfall at the weekend.
What is happening? The usual flooding in the town of Maypen. That's a recurring decimal. But not only that, but we have had some breakaways, especially up in the Frankfield area. We also have bad land slippages along the roadway from Thompson Town to Frankfield and some in the Rock River area. We also have along the road from Thompson Town to Victoria. There's a breakaway there. I had to send my engineers up there along with the council working to see if they can make a passageway through some private property.
Winston Mirage, Mayor of Maypen. Meanwhile, Mayor of Black River, Derek Sangster, says roadways in St. Elizabeth were similarly affected by the floodwaters.
We were pretty badly impacted by the weather. Several of our areas were, flooded out. We have some traditional flood-prone areas, such as Slipe, Arlington Vineyard, Party area, and in the Treasure Beach area to some extent. But other areas were pretty badly more affected than others. In the Ginger Hill area, there's a lot of slippage, power lines were damaged, landslides. In the Junction area, in Ribbit, areas like Ribbit and Shaddock Hill, those areas saw extremely bad flooding.
Derek Sangster, Mayor of Black River. They were speaking during yesterday's edition of Nationwide at 5 with Cliff Hughes and Tyrone Reed. In the meantime, a resident of the Hill Run community in St. Catherine is pleading for help from the authorities, saying the community has been marooned by floodwaters. The resident says the roads in the community have been flooded since Friday, and she says residents still cannot leave or enter the community.
We are flooded out from Friday. Nobody cannot move in or out. Nobody can come out. If you come out, you're taking chance. When I was coming home on Friday evening, the water on the avenue passed my waist, and I'm 5 feet 4. On the road itself, all the roads in the community. All the roads in the community. Still rainfall last night, so the road is still flooded. Nothing cannot come down unless it's some big unit.
The Hill Run resident is appealing to the political representatives for the area to send help.
We're really suffering down here and need some help. I'm supposed to go to work from Saturday and I cannot go out to work. The drains need cleaning and all of those. No help.
A resident of Hill Run in St. Catherine speaking yesterday with Nationwide News. The Jamaica Public Service Company, JPS, says up to late yesterday afternoon it had restored power to most of its customers who were affected by the inclement weather at the weekend. The island was battered by heavy rains and winds associated with Zeta, which is now a hurricane. Director of Corporate Communications and Customer Experience at the JPS, Winsome Callum, said just under 10,000 customers were without power up to 4 p.m. yesterday.
We have just under 2% of our customers without electricity. That's just under 10,000 customers. The parishes that are affected include Kingston and St. Andrew, Portland, St. Thomas, St. Catherine, Trelawney, St. James, and Westmoreland.
Ms. Callum says the Light and Power Company's restoration efforts have been hampered by challenges in accessing certain areas.
Now, several customers, unfortunately, were without power since yesterday because the weather conditions were very difficult and prevented us from finishing restoration. We did manage this morning to get some of these customers back, but we're still facing challenges of difficult terrain, flooding, and landslides, and that has slowed down the restoration process significantly.
Winsome Callum, Director of Corporate Communications and Customer Experience at JPS, speaking yesterday with Nationwide News. The Office of Utilities Regulation, OUR, has standardized customer satisfaction standards of the National Water Commission, NWC, and the Jamaica Public Service Company, JPS. In a statement, the OUR says it recognizes that call centers are an integral part of the customer service delivered by utility providers. It says call centers are one of the main channels through which customers interact with the utility companies. The utility regulator says based on a review of call center standards, neither entity measures all the established standards or key performance indicators that assess customer satisfaction. The OUR says in an effort to ensure that the JPS and NWC provide and maintain an acceptable level of service through their call centers, it has standardized the parameters that must be measured. According to the OUR, this will improve customer satisfaction. Elizabeth Bennett Marsh is the OUR's public education specialist.
JPS and NWC, every quarter, we ask them to send something to us about how their call centers perform. But what we find is that JPS and NWC have different measurements for their call centers. They share some commonalities, but in some cases they were different. So what we have said is, okay, let's move to standardize JPS and NWC call center standards. Let's move to have one set of standards for both your call centers. And if you never have this as a standard, add this, because we're trying to standardize what customers should expect when they call the JPS and NWC call centers.
She says when customers know what to expect, they will be empowered to hold the utility companies accountable.
It will be significant because COVID notwithstanding, it's a matter of what you should expect. So the more customers who know what you should expect when you come to our call centers, the more you can hold JPS and NWC accountable. And in fact, what we have said is normally you give us your analysis of how your call centers perform. That is good, but we also need the raw information from your call centers.
Elizabeth Bennett Marsh, Public Education Specialist at the Office of Utilities Regulation, OUR. And in international news this morning, researchers say levels of protective antibodies in people is waning quite rapidly after coronavirus infection. Antibodies are a key part of the immune defense and stop the virus from getting inside the body's cells. The Imperial College London team found the number of people testing positive for antibodies has fallen by 26% between June and September. The researchers say immunity appears to be fading and there's a risk of catching the virus multiple times. More than 350,000 people in England have taken an antibody test as part of the REACT-2 study so far. In the first round of testing at the end of June and the beginning of July, about 60 in 1,000 people had detectable antibodies. But in the latest set of tests in September, only 44 per 1,000 people were positive. The U.S. Senate has confirmed Judge Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court a week before the presidential election. It's seen as a victory for U.S. President Donald Trump. Mr. Trump's fellow Republicans voted 52-48 to approve the judge, overcoming the unified opposition of Democrats. Her appointment seals for the foreseeable future a 6-3 conservative majority on the top U.S. judicial body. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden called the move rushed and unprecedented. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer said that by going ahead with the vote so close to the election, the Republican majority was lighting its credibility on fire. And that's it for the news at 7. I'm Tawna Thomas.